Welcome, everyone. The last Friday of June in 2026, Matt Wheeler is joining. And I I remember now to ask about socks. So what socks do you have?
All right, so I had to actually remember what type of, wait, is it going to show these? Wait, there we
Yeah.
go.
Is that like a flower? Is that roses or carnations or something?
Carnations. And like,
Oh, there you go.
I was like, somebody asked, they're like, what kind of flowers are those? And I was like, oh, it starts with a C. My brain could not remember it was carnations. Yeah, so the fun little yellow carnation socks.
Yeah. So we volunteer for Arizona Golden Rescue, and they gave us as kind of a fun little award thing
Uh-huh.
Sunny Delight socks. They have Sunny Delight orange shoes. They're cute socks. I was like, oh, Matt would love these, but they they said because of our sunny personality and our willingness to help, and I was like,
Oh,
I mean, it's really cute,
that
but I
is
was like,
super
oh, this
cute.
is so Matt. I should
Yeah,
next time I'll bring the socks and show you those. So
you
yeah,
should. I think it would
there
be
you go.
cool if we both shared
There you
cool
go.
socks.
Yeah. I only have one pair of cool socks, so that's all you're
The
gonna
Sunny
get.
Delight ones,
This
those are
is
the
the
only.
only one. Everything else is just socks. So yeah.
That's
So
awesome.
what do you have for us today?
Oh, it's a great question. So it's interesting. We're gonna dive into maybe not all of them, but we're gonna dive into a little bit on the qualities of empathy.
Oh, great.
So I'm gonna start out by talking about, well, one, when we talk about empathy, um, I want everyone to, uh, I want you to think about that empathy is it's a specific skill for a specific purpose. And the purpose of empathy is to help the other person feel, potentially to feel safe and connected and grounded and but the idea is when I give empathy to somebody else, they feel closer to me. They might trust me more. They might not, right? But the idea is that we're going to connect with each other as people. Now, um, empathy, in my opinion, can be a very simple thing, but I think it can actually be very complicated because although it's just a skill, some people are much better at the skill than others. And so I always start off with understanding that the biggest barriers that I see to preventing empathy for occurring tend to be our own emotions. So my stuff coming up can be a huge barrier for preventing empathy. But here's what's really interesting is that one of the biggest uh, connections with empathy is my stuff coming up. And so I'm gonna try and slow that down and talk a little bit about that. And I wrote a bunch of stuff up on the whiteboard, and so occasionally I'm gonna look off to my whiteboard that's where I put my notes today. Um, but so my emotions can block empathy and they can actually enhance empathy. Also, my shame. And I would argue that shame is going to be my biggest block. So if I'm sitting with somebody, whether it's a client or a friend, now generally, if I'm with a client, it's pretty rare my own shame comes up just because this is my environment and I'm used to this and I've done this for so long. It doesn't mean it can't happen. But in any circumstance, if I'm struggling with empathy, I have to check in my own stuff, my own shame specifically, because if I feel like I'm having internal shame, like I'm a failure, I'm not good enough, no matter how hard I try, it's never going to be good enough. That's going to be the internal dialogue that I feel about myself. Or I have the shame that's like, man, no matter how hard I try, this person isn't going to believe that I'm good enough. And so why bother? And so whether I now externalize my shame and put it on someone else, which is really all about myself, that internal external shame is blocking me from being present with the person I'm trying to connect with. And so those are some of the barriers. Now, interestingly enough, confusion is one of the biggest barriers of all the emotions. I think confusion can be a big barrier, but confusion allows us to get curious. So it's one of my favorite emotions, not because it feels amazing, but because it drives an opportunity for connection if we allow it. So, the first quality of empathy that's often discussed, it's not a step, like meaning we don't have to do this at all in order to be empathetic. It's just one of the several qualities. The first quality is perspective taking. And the way that this is phrased is recognizing the other person's perspective as their truth. Now, this is where things get interesting because if I'm going to have empathy, I need to see that what they're sharing with me is the way that they see the world. It's the way that things make sense to them. It is truly the truth to them. Um, and sometimes in engaging empathetically, the person's underlying need is to be heard. It's weird because it's not always. Like there's times where I will spend a lot of energy on perspective taking, and I've seen people get really annoyed. And I have to clue in and go, oh, they might not need perspective taking right now. That might not be what's important to them or the most important to them. So, but being heard is a really key piece of perspective taking. So, when you're practicing empathy, you could, when somebody is sharing something else with you, their hurt, their pain, or their joy, whatever it is they're sharing, what I'm noticing is I want to, if I'm going to perspective take, I'm going to spend a bit of time making sure that they feel that I hear them, that they hear that I'm taking their perspective. This requires me to slow down. And, and in a sense, I'm not focusing. This is going to sound funny. I'm not focusing on their story that they're sharing with me. I'm focusing on what is it in their story that is it that I can tell is important to them to be heard. So somebody's sharing a lot of details with me. I'm processing the details, but I'm recognizing that my main goal in order to connect in this moment is to figure out what's important to them and share that with them. Now, what's weird is if you're someone like me, I might not even totally know what is important to me, and I'm sharing a bunch of information, and suddenly somebody who's really good at empathizing can clue into bits and pieces. And when they clue into a certain bit, I might be like, oh my gosh, that's it. Like, that's why I'm sharing this story. And other times I'm like, oh, no, 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 that's not it. And that helps me process. And so, um, if you think about when you're doing perspective taking, the intention and the purpose of the exercise is about connecting with the other person. It's not about their story, so much as it is about them having room to process their story. Now, a lot of the time, it's in an empathetic experience that I have room to change my own story, or I can help somebody else change their story, but I'm not doing it directly. And I'll get to that a little bit more in a second. In fact, the best thing I can do when I'm being empathetic is to remind myself I can't change their perspective. That's not the purpose of this exercise. The purpose of this exercise is to help them feel and experience an empathetic connection with me as a person. So, uh, before I go any further, I don't know if we want to dive into any questions and from you, Tammy, and we can leave it at here, and we can hit qualities of empathy in other.
No, because you said, yeah, because I'm underlining. I pulled my highlighter up. Because it's like I can change my story or help them change their story, but I can't change their perspective. So I want to know more.
Yeah, so I don't. Okay, so I'll rewind that. What I meant was the purpose of this exercise is not to change their story. it's not my goal to change their story.
Uh-huh.
It's not my goal to change their perspective. The
Uh-huh.
purpose of the exercise is to feel connection. Now,
Right.
I might I in an empathy exercise, it's it's most beneficial if I keep my story out of it, right? So I'm
Yes.
not trying to change my story. I'm not trying to do anything with my story. If I want you to feel heard and connected and understood and feel an empathetic connection with me, then my goal is to just be in that experience so that you can figure it out.
Okay.
Now, as a clinician, when people come in, part of the role of a clinician generally is to help people explore and change things and figure it out. I know I have a little bit more liberty, but I even still will often ask like, "Hey, I hear you sharing this and I'll help I'll do my best to make sure they feel heard and understood." And then I might ask like, "Hey, are you wanting a different perspective or are you just wanting to be heard?" Right? So
Mm.
that's me asking for consent. But we're now moving out of an empathy exercise and we're moving into um me showing up for a different need entirely. Like this is, oh, you want me to now give you perspective, right? But I'm not going to do that generally without asking permission or unless I have an established relationship where permission has been granted so many times that this is just now what we do. So there's empathy in the process of helping them explore their perspective. But the coolest thing about it is, even as a clinician, I can't change someone's perspective. I can invite them to explore their own perspective and I can invite them to change, but I have no ability, even as a clinician, to change somebody else's perspective. Does that
Yeah,
clarify?
no, that makes a lot of sense. And I think about, I often refer to myself as the queen of reframing because, it's like I hear lots of stuff, and it can be, even for myself, I do this a lot for myself. That, I look at something and I go, I wonder if there's another way to look at it. So I've learned to have that skill for myself, which is helpful. But yes, if invited into a conversation with somebody, are you open to hearing, another side of it,
Uh-huh.
uh, and it's not just about this addiction world and betrayal world. This is stuff across the board where I think it's really easy to have our perspective, and that's what we see, which is exactly what we see. And we both know Dr. Kenny Adams, and I remember during his trainings he talked about it's like we're looking through a prism, prism, just not prison, prism. And we're looking through that, but we're looking through one facet of it, and other people are looking at the same thing, but through different areas. And all of those are true, but, could we look at, well, if I move to your side of the prism, what is that going to look like? Just looking more rounded at, at things. And I think often it's really challenging if we have our the focus laser focus on this is what it is and this is how it is, then if we're open to having like you say, you're doing your therapist hat, and you're inviting you're asking if you are able to share something, you might have it at a different level that's going to help broaden the scope of what you're hearing and seeing, which for me personally has always been useful. If I'm, because if I've got something, this is what it is, I'm pretty rigid in my thinking. And there could be pieces of that, but there also could be more. So it's helpful for me to go, that could be part of the story, but I'm open to hearing more. I may hold my same exact perspective, like you're saying. I may just go, yep, nope, this is it. But I also may go, oh, there was more to this story. And, and another person's lens can be really useful. So,
Yeah, and before typically when I'm really, especially when I'm building a relationship, I'm not going to even as a therapist, when somebody first comes in, I'm spending so much time just trying to ask and understand. I I have noticed that unless I have the alliance and the trust with somebody, even a client, there's times where I realize, gosh, I jumped in too quick to try and help them explore and change their perspective. They did not feel heard well enough. And that might be why a client is like, gosh, I did a session and that just didn't feel right because the therapist may not or me may not have stayed in that long enough to build the trust for them to be heard. If I jump to reframing and that trust hasn't been built, you lose the connection.
I
But
agree. Yeah.
being the queen of reframing is it's an amazing skill set for so many reasons. Uh, but that empathy has to be typically established very strongly first.
I agree. And a lot of where I use it is if I'm, overwhelmed, if I'm feeling like, here's yet another problem, I'm really quick to go, I'm going to reframe this as, these are all pieces that need to be done. And a problem is an opportunity. I mean, I shift the focus of this is how I'm going to approach it, not just this is the problem, and I stay, in that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it sounds like most of the reframing you're talking about is in your own head.
I do the most reframing for myself. I've
Yeah.
learned to do that because
Now,
I've taken other people's voices in, and I've
yeah.
learned I it's one of
Well,
those
there's
things that, like, we have friends and we go, okay, my friend, this, I've used you. My friend Matt would say this, and so, you
uh
know, I've quoted you a million times on
in your
gracious
head.
assumptions. No,
Oh, gracious them.
no, yeah. I mean, I go, I'm going to choose to make
Yeah.
a gracious assumption. That's a reframing of
Oh,
whatever it was I
totally.
think I was looking at.
Right, but the cool part about reframing in our own head, there's less of a risk of like fracturing the relationship.
Correct. Yes.
And at the same time, though, the concept still applies. If I'm not giving myself enough self-compassion, if I'm reframing all the time, I might even trust myself less and less. But no, that it's self-compassion and then reframing in our own head, phenomenal skill in a relational outside of the internal family system, right? In a relational system, reframing it, like I said, is wonderful as long as that's
Oh
trusted
yeah. Yeah, I absolutely, I do not offer, any
until
other point of view
until it's
unless there's
invited.
willingness to,
Yep.
I get it,
Oh yeah.
I believe that in every relationship, I have to earn the right, to say something, that might be contrary to what somebody's, thinking. So I would rather listen then. So
Yeah. Well, we can stop on this subject and
let's stop on the subject for a moment. Let's answer questions. We take more questions, and then if we have more time, we'll come back to it. So would sex addict husband have the same traits in illicit massage? I assume parlors, the way he didn't touch wife during sex. My husband was very distant and never touched me, only self pleasure. Also, betrayed wife D-Day was 1.5 years ago, and husband doing very good. Just still trying to understand my life again. So that's from the same person.
yeah, and gosh, I have some questions. So when and maybe the person can clarify, would sex addict husband have the same traits in illicit massage parlors, uh, the way he didn't touch wife during sex? So maybe you could give me a little bit more clarity. I'm assuming so it's hard if I'm going to talk about kind of a more global thing that I've seen. I don't know that I have statistics to back it up, but what's interesting, when there has been betrayal on this level, the injury that's there, um, it is very interesting how often I have a hurt partner who, in their mind, believes that their partner went and did the things with other people that they wouldn't do with their partner. And I think that's and again, I'm struggling to fully understand the question, but I think that's kind of what you're getting at.
That's what I'm reading as well. So yeah.
Um, okay. And so here's what's difficult. Um, Oftentimes, uh, and again, this is going to be anecdotal, just based on the work I've done with different individuals who
Oh,
have.
he was treating me like an object and did not want to have sex often. So that's
Okay,
the clarification. Okay.
right. And so, okay, so y usually, and there are exceptions, but usually what I have seen, again, this is anecdotal, is that oftentimes the sexual acting out behavior um, isn't vastly different than like what's happening at home. And so I'll give you an example. So somebody might go to a massage parlor and get a hand job, for instance, and then like and the partner who feels incredibly betrayed because it's breaking the relational agreement and it's not okay will often think, well, gosh, how come they can go give sexual energy to a sex worker and have this experience with them that they aren't willing to have with me? And most of the time, what I've seen is that they aren't capable of going and having this experience that you're expecting them to have with you, and they're just suddenly giving all that energy to the other person. In fact, um, oftentimes the going to the massage place is about not having to face rejection. It's often about the ability to receive pleasure without having a risk of pain, of rejection, or maybe even, well, if I'm going to be able to show up for my partner, I need to be emotionally tuned in. I need to give them time and attention. I need to give them care. If I don't know how to do that, if I'm scared to do that, if I'm whatever's going on for me, and in my fantasy, I wish I could just get sexual pleasure without having to risk a emotional connection and attachment and vulnerability. And so if I could just go to receive a massage and it's just this easy exchange of money, right? It's just here's the relational agreement. I have money, you give me this, I leave, nothing. And so oftentimes that I will explore with the individual like what is going on in those moments. Now, here's the hard part. As a partner, I don't encourage you to dive into that. Like typically I'm like as a partner, I would stay out of trying to find out the information of what was going on in the head of your partner, because what was going on in the mind of your partner is chaos that often they're still trying to figure out or they've never understood. What you're actually probably grappling with is, how do I deal with the pain of not having the type of sexual relationship that I had been longing to have, and I've been treated like an object, and you didn't want to come to me very often. But not only that, like I wasn't longing for it because usually we each have like these different things that get us wanting. So there's desire, which is going to be the mental concept, the emotional concept of wanting to be sexual, and then you have arousal, which is going to be physical. And so without the desire hitting me, maybe if arousal hits me and I'm willing to satisfy the arousal, then we can be sexual without emotional connection, right? One person might be that way. And so you're grieving that this part of your relationship hasn't been there. And part of you wants to figure it out through what was maybe going on in his head. And the difficult part is you're not going to be able to do that. Like you've got to actually figure out what's the pain that was going on for me. I was lonely. And if he would come to me for sexual pleasure, there wasn't enough. other things happening. Let's see. I think it's Patty Kleinfeld. I'd have to look it up again, who said it is not dysfunctional to not want sex that you do not like. And so if you're going, so if your partner who is reaching to you to be sexual, and you're like, gosh, I must not be a sexual person. I must not have a lot of sexual desire. When I sit, so again, for those of you that don't know, not only am I a certified sex addiction therapist, I'm now a certified sex therapist. And in my certified sex therapy training, I had to learn so much about understanding that you and your partner might start believing, oh, I guess I must not be a sexual person. I guess I just must not have must not have a lot of desire. And it's understanding that no, how about maybe your partner doesn't know how to bring that up in you. Maybe your partner, what you really need personally is a lot of emotional connection and a lot of emotional safety and a feeling of like um, of being heard and understood, like the empathy thing we were talking about, right? And when that's there and your body feels close and your emotions are connected and you just feel safe and comfortable and suddenly you're like, "Oh, I start having desires." And it's like, "Yeah, because you're not going to want to have sex that you do not like." And so objectified sex to you doesn't feel good. There's other people who are like, I particularly like it. It's really interesting how each of us has different needs and desires and wants, and sometimes we might want sex that's uh it's kind of a weird thing to say, but feels a little more objectified. It's just maybe less connected, less emotionally in tune. There's all sorts of different types of sex that each of us can enjoy. But if for you, I felt like I was being treated like an object, and so therefore I didn't want to have sex very often. It's like, okay, so now we have an idea of what kind of sex doesn't work for you. He would need to work on figuring out, well, what kind of sex do you enjoy? Now, keep in mind, the kind of sex you enjoy might start 3 days from now, or start right now for 3 days from now, where it's like, oh, well, let's talk and connect and let's spend time together. But if out of nowhere you've been ignoring me for 3 days, and if for the last 3 days you have been snippy and you come to me and you want to be sexual, well, my body isn't responding to that. I'm not less of a sexual person. The context for which what drives sex for me is not working. Um, so I would imagine whatever kind of sex he was having in a massage parlor had to do with whatever kind of sex might have been easiest or uh, simplest. I don't know what was going on for him. Like he would have to figure that out. And it's totally okay that you are sitting there going, well, I don't like that kind of sex. That doesn't work for me. And it's like, you don't have to like it. No wonder why you're not wanting to have it very often. So I hope that answered the question, Tam.
Yeah, and I think you did a great job. But yes, and I often share with partners, you will never understand. Like if he, Dr. Rob has talked about if if he could play a reel, of film, old school, of every little, every little snapshot of everything, an addict is still going to not know why. Like it's a maladaptive coping mechanism. A partner trying to understand why an addict is doing or not doing, what Matt was talking about is, um, it's transactional. This is, a someone working in a massage parlor is going to provide good customer service because it is financial. So the no, it is. It's
No,
the
it
better
just made
customer
me,
service you
it just,
provide, then you're going to get more money. I mean, like, and guess what? Then you'll probably get a repeat customer. I mean, like all of the it's if you and it sounds simplistic, and I don't mean it to be slighting any, but that's what that's a sex worker. It's transactional. A sugar baby. It's transactional. All of those things are transactional, and it's easy because I don't have to. I don't have to, I don't have to get you in the mood. I don't have to have dinner and talk about stuff. It literally is, I have cash. I want this. And, but for partners, I hear that I'm trying to understand my life again. I want to know why he did this, so that I can see if there's something. It's a safety thing, but you will never understand because you would never do this stuff. And so, partners, I think you can have like an understanding of this as a maladaptive coping mechanism. You can have an understanding on some, cerebral level, but you will never understand how someone could do that and not be thinking of you. But the reality is, we have to not think about you because otherwise we wouldn't do it. And so, that's the problem with all of this is like
Oh,
you can't ever really understand. We don't really understand other than, we've come up with ways. The cycle of addiction. I'll pull that. I mean, there's all kinds of stuff that could be useful for you to gain education on it, but
but
it was still it's a still horrible choice for him, and he chose to do it. So yeah,
right. It is a horrible choice, and he has to be accountable for that
yes,
and accountable for how it hurt you. But it's interesting. Again, I'm going to go back to this. I see this all too often. A betrayed partner is spending. So I think this is a great question, and
hmm
I understand why somebody would be asking, but I'm going to tell you that asking him about him is the wrong thing to do. And so let me give you another example. The number of very hurt, betrayed partners who have a legitimate question in, I don't understand. What were you thinking? How could you love me and care about me and all of these things and then do this? And I understand where they're coming from in the sense that I'm sitting there going, sure, that's how a emotionally healthy person actually thinks about things like, hey, I'm thinking about doing this. Gosh, I'm not sure that I should do that. That would cause a lot of pain. When somebody is unhealthy and trying to find coping mechanisms to survive life, or they're continuing forward coping mechanisms for one reason or another they've always had, they're not thinking. And that's the problem, is that they're not tuned in to what's going on in their body and the deficit. They're tuned into, how can I make my pain go away? And then it's as if some of them will be like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I did that. You know what? I'm not going to tell a soul. I'm just going to make sure I never do it again. And around and around that pattern might repeat. Because in order to actually change things, they've got to tune in and figure out what's going on inside. Now, I would encourage, whether it's just the one individual watching this, but for if both of you are watching, let's talk about what a cool opportunity you guys now have. Right. So, one of the things that I get most nervous about when I'm working with couples that are going through sex addiction treatment, and that's kind of the only model that they're looking at, is that too often we can go into sexual avoidance. And if we're so focused on sobriety, and I'm not suggesting that sobriety isn't important, but again, honesty is more important than sobriety. And I hope that makes sense what I'm saying. We are always striving for sobriety, but I've worked with way too many couples where there is sobriety, truly, and they can't figure out why nothing's getting better. And it's because, in part, if because the sobriety or lack of sobriety is not the issue, it's the deception, the breaking of the relational agreements that are the problem. And so in this situation, as a couple, we have this amazing opportunity to start to you are just dropping links into the chat. Which is great. Everybody enjoy him. She's like
I
resourcing the
know.
chat, right?
Yes.
But but the idea is, okay, so here we are as a couple, and yeah, a year and a half ago, and he's doing really good, and and you're both trying to understand things. Less focus on what were you thinking and what were you doing. It's more, hey, what would it look like to develop a sexual relationship between the two of us that might be really new to you? You may not find it arousing to have an emotionally connected relationship. Well, one, why is that? Well, it might be it's terrifying. Well, guess what? One of the biggest blocks to sexual performance is actually fear. Fear, anxiety, and pressure will kill sexual arousal, desire, performance. And so oftentimes I'm spending a ton of time with a couple to try and understand what are the emotional components. So as a couple, you might try to engage, you might feel emotionally connected, and there's possibly a performance issue going on, or it's not as pleasurable. And it's like, well, if there was never a time to develop um, an arousal to connection and it's filled with fear, can we develop that as a couple? Can we explore what that looks like? Now, at the same time, sometimes it might not be as pleasurable, and he might want sex that feels a little more transactional. Well, as a couple, there are ways of doing that. And that is totally doable for a lot of couples as long as both are receiving satisfaction. So if I get very connected, emotional sex, and I enjoy it, then how can I give sex that is more pleasurable for him that feels a little more transactional? In that regard, we're just showing up for each other's sexual pleasures. And that can totally work. But we as a couple have to figure that out and explore that together. That requires a lot of vulnerability, but that's a beautiful opportunity for you guys to be able to say, hey, what can we learn about what wasn't working and what it is you're needing and what wasn't working for me and what it is I'm needing? And how do we figure this out together so that we both get a sexual pleasure that works for us? Too often I've seen, let's just stereotypically say, I have a man who's like, gosh, now the only type of sex that we can do is like candles and flower petals and really long floor play, foreplay, and really long, like, and it has to be this huge production, and the pressure there of, I guess I'm not allowed to enjoy sex that isn't filled with a lot of maybe more intensity that she might enjoy, and it's like, what a bummer. Because you have this issue in your past, you can't find sexual pleasure that you enjoy, and it can only be the way that, and it's like, well, have you guys talked about that? Can you explore that together? So there's so much opportunity for sexual healing as couples. But again, the goal would be to not focus on what was happening in the past, because you're gonna not necessarily find too many answers there. It's, well, then how can I show up for you and how can you show up for me so that we both can experience sexual pleasure? So I'd be
Well,
curious.
yeah, and I was thinking about this, talking about intimacy. We hear last a couples ago, we're not intimate, and I usually go, yes, and you're probably not having sex either, because all of the stuff that you're talking about, is like the 3 days of what we had a fun day at the farmers market or what. I mean, what, it
Right.
doesn't really matter. Is how are we showing up for each other? And you said it like 18 different ways. Have you talked about it? Are you communicating about it? Like have the conversations. I find, and I bet you do too, that so often there's no talking about this. We're making assumptions, about a lot of this stuff, or fear-based. I'm afraid of performance, but
Oh,
as a partner, I'm going, if we do that stuff, he's going to relapse because he's going to be thinking about,
oh, it's so interesting how often that comes up. Like there then develops this fear, which again, I'm going to tell you, it does you no good as a hurt partner to try and manage his recovery, either by trying to be hypersexual to make up a difference or to be non-sexual, or like, oh, well, I better not do this because that might remind him of things in the past, right? Whatever it is, it's like that's not doing you any favors. Have that conversation, because I'm going to tell you, what I've typically found, and I don't want to say 100%, but it's nigh unto it. Sex with a committed partner where we have relational agreements and we talk about it and we work through it together is not going to replicate what was happening in the past, because in the past, or with acting out behavior is is totally different. And so now I might have a conversation of, hey, I'm afraid this might trigger something from you. And your partner might say, you know what, it might, but can we work through it? Like, can that be a good thing for it to trigger something in me and I can learn about it? And if I need to say that this isn't going to work for me, I will tell you, right? So let's have that conversation instead of trying to manage it by either being hypersexual or hyposexual. I don't know. I think I'm getting that right, but so, but I love that you bring it up because I hear that all the time. And as a betrayed partner, you want to focus more on understanding yourself and understanding your hurts and working through that and sharing those rather than making it about them and their and what they did with somebody else. Not that that can't aid in healing in some way, but that's not typically the way to find healing within yourself.
And this continues. I was on board with any sex I could get from him. We are
Of
doing
course you
everything
were.
now that he can show up and not be watching porn and going to massage rooms. So,
Yeah,
and I hear I'm bored with any kind of sex I can get from him.
that sounds
But
like
just like,
desperation.
well, I know, but that's what I was like to me, it's like, what is, what is your ask? Like, like
Well,
you're only getting what he's willing.
Well,
So
during the acting out behavior, though, what they're saying is, I got so
mhm.
desperate wanting any
Oh,
kind of
I see.
sexual
Yeah. Okay.
connection, right? I would take anything I could get, and
I
I
gotcha.
hear that all the time. It's like, yeah,
Okay.
when we're starving, we want connection, and we'll take anything we can get. Like even bad sex is, to some people, is better than no sex at all. But
Hmm.
it's super confusing because
Hmm.
as a hurt partner, you you are sitting there going, man, I'd take bad sex over nothing. And yet they still wouldn't come to me. And again, it's as if, again, I'm going to say it and I'm going to say it strongly. It's because sex was never the issue. It's because it's it's an emotional thing. It's a coping mechanism issue. It's a survival thing. And so we make the mistake that sex was the problem to begin with. And I hear that from hurt partners all the time. Well, gosh, I was willing to do anything and I was willing to do whatever all the time. And I was the one constantly coming onto them. Right. It has nothing to do with sex, right? Alcoholism has nothing to do with alcohol. I mean,
Not, I always say it's not because alcohol tastes so good. It's what's it going to do for me? I mean, like that
right.
was, yeah. So any of the and I threw in the chat. Scott did porn porn addiction part one and part two, and he talks about all of that. It isn't about porn or sex. It's about the escape. And that's what, going to a massage parlor, transactional. That's intensity rather than intimacy. It's intensity rather than connection and vulnerability.
So it's interesting because like as I sit here and I talk through it, I get it. Like I'm hearing betrayed partners with this pain and I'm like, I don't blame you. Like your logic and trying to figure it out, it makes sense why we
Hmm.
go there. The problem is it's just not going to lead to healing. Like, and so the more time you spend, and people don't tend to love it when I say this, but the more time a hurt partner spends trying to figure out their partner, the more time they're wasting on their own healing. Or the more time they try to spend managing, well, how do I make sure you don't act out again? How about you can't? Like that is a fruitless effort for you. Why do we do it? Because we're scared. But again, instead of figuring out how to fortify ourselves and how to learn what our needs and wants are and how to learn what our boundaries are and learn how to advocate for ourselves better and learn how to um, have healthier conversations, right? The more time, like again, it's not worthless to have a conversation about some of these things, but if you're trying to find your healing in that, that is worthless. It is fruitless. It won't end in that. But we do it naturally. I can think of every time I've been hurt, betrayed, exploited, abused, right? There is a decent portion of my recovery it's always in the beginning, and it's always a waste of time to some degree of trying to figure out why would they do this? And it's like you cannot like to getting into the mind of somebody who exploits us, hurts us, betrays us, abuses us. Uh, there can be some benefit, but it's not going to come in us typically finding healing. It, we
No,
we
yeah.
we might find compassion and understanding, and yet still we may or may not want anything to do with that person. But the more energy I put into that, the less energy I'm putting in and focusing on my bleeding at this moment. And it might sound confusing. I've had people get upset with me. I don't blame them. I've been there. I've had people tell me something similar when I'm in my own wounding, and it not make sense. And the more healing I'm doing, the more that it makes sense to me. But it's hard.
No, and I'm with you, but it's like again that I need other people's perspective and lenses because if I'm down here in the trenches, like I'm just going to keep picking away. I need to know. I
Yeah.
need to know. And somebody going like, what would it look like if you go? There's enough there. There's a lot of pain. You already know there's a lot. And what would it look like if you came up a few levels and were able to take a breath? All of this stuff really points out, and you mentioned that not just sex addiction, but also sexual health and healing and finding qualified people. And I do that often too, as a share, when people get to a certain point, like you're a year and a half in, if there's issues and you haven't been able to, figure it out yourselves, not a big surprise, then working with a qualified professional that can help you with that aspect of it. We talk about like sensate, focus, touch. There's so many different things that you can do that can start, helping people move forward in making those physical connections that isn't sex,
Oh,
but that
sensate
makes those.
focus. Yeah, what I
Mhm.
love about things like sensate focus is it's like for instance, couples that haven't been having sex for a while because of hurt and pain or avoidance, right? Whatever it might be. Oftentimes it's actually spending time practicing removing physical touch from sex, right? Because what I often hear, it's so sad how often I might hear a partner say, "Gosh, I don't ever want to be touched by them." And when I sit down and start exploring, it's like, well, yeah, because would I love a shoulder massage or a foot massage or a back scratch? Of course, I'd love that. But there's no such thing without duty, obligation, it has to lead to sex. And so much of actually creating a healthy sexual life as a couple is realizing that touch isn't sex. And how do we have a healthy touch life? How do we have a healthy, um, uh, back massage life that is that I feel safe and comfortable is completely different than our sex life. Now, it doesn't mean that in a safe and healthy connected relationship that a back rub couldn't turn into sexual connection of some kind. However, if I feel like it's going to move from one to the other all the time, then I just want to push that away, right? So now, because it feels better to get rid of the pressure. So when we talk about things like sensate focus, it's learning to have healthy touch, and both of us understand this is just touch. And it doesn't have to be sex. So it can be a wonderful intervention for learning how to separate touch from sex.
And I'm pulling another, what is in intimacy? Because uh, on one of the webinars, Dr. Rob and a question came up, and he at the time was using a lot of Chat GBT, and so he pulled up on Chat GBT, intimacy, and the top 15 terms for intimacy, which is the ones he read through. none of them had sex. That was not it. And so when people automatically assume that, sex is intimacy, and it can be part of the entire thing, but kind of what Matt was talking about earlier, if you don't like or trust that person, why would you, like your body isn't even going to want to have sex. So all of the things that create the safe environment, the communication, sensate focus touch, where it's like, okay, we like to hold hands. Okay, great. All of those things, I'm connecting, I'm paying attention to you. That is intimacy. I'm
Yeah.
listening to you. I'm hearing what you're saying. I'm looking at your expression and going, oh God, you looks like you had a really hard day today. I'm paying attention, to those things. That, wow, that creates the connection. And, can it lead to sex? Sure, but then it's also not, it can take some of the fear and anxiety away because we're connected. We're in a place where, we love and care about each other. It isn't like, I have to score a 10 on this, so. Okay,
Great,
other
great.
questions for us?
Yeah,
Yeah.
great question. If anybody has any more, we got another few
We
minutes.
got a few minutes. Yeah, because otherwise, I mean, I know you had more on your topic, so you can always you float back to that if you would like to. So more on your whiteboard.
Oh, I got more if that's where we need to
Okay.
go. So we can go there if nobody's got a question. Um, so the next quality of empathy would be staying out of judgment. Now, what's interesting is we could probably in the next one pick up here, but staying out of judgment means I'm not fixing, I'm not offering solutions, and going back to what we were talking about earlier, I'm not trying to change your perspective. Staying out of judgment is such a unique quality because it requires me to, as part of connection, be in your perspective. And to some degree, I'm being like, I'm okay with your perspective because this is your experience. But you can, it's not having judgments. So when I'm being empathetic, I'm having judgments like crazy because judgments aren't bad. But when I'm in an empathetic experience, I'm just not um, trying to use my judgment to change your perspective. I will use my judgments to actually get curious. And so, if somebody shares something with me, and not this is not to be shameful, but I'll give you an example. I don't have any face tattoos, right? And I have not spent a ton of time talking with people who have face tattoos. But so I don't know the psychology behind it. I don't know why somebody would really like a face tattoo. But to give you an example that I do have judgments there. I'm not sure I understand the motivation of getting a tattoo on my face. But and I'm not talking about like makeup, like a makeup tattoo.
Right.
That actually I can go, yeah, makes sense to me, right? Like permanent makeup, right? But again, that's me understanding that perspective. So if I had a judgment about somebody with a face tattoo, I might say, hey, they're sharing me. They might be having some frustration. Hey, I got this tattoo and I love it. And I'm like, oh, cool. Tell me why you love it. Like my judgment is I wouldn't love it. So help me understand why you love it. So now I'm using my judgment. I don't know why you love it. It doesn't make sense to me. Teach me why you love it. It could be like, hey, like is there something in your culture? Is there something in your family? Like is there something about that that has more meaning and understanding than I might know? Like I'm using my judgments to try and get curious to understand. And when it clicks for me, I might be like, oh my gosh, okay, so it sounds like this is what's happening there for you. And I can see why that might be important. And I still don't have to agree. Like it still doesn't need to be true for me. And I still might think, hey, I'm not sure why that's helpful for you, but if this works, go for it. So use your judgment to get more curious. Oh, we just got a question with 4 minutes left.
Okay.
Let's come back to stay out of judgment. Next.
I will plan on it. Continued. Okay, 2 years since D-Day, I'm the betrayed. My hubby has pulled back almost entirely, saying sexual terms and gestures to me. This was welcomed for a while, but now it's turning the other way. I'm now starting to feel objectified by him not saying things. They tend to be only said during sex or if I'm wearing something more alluring. This is a question we both have for you, Matt. He's also sitting here with me. Great. Thanks for both of
Oh,
you being here. Yeah.
I love it. Okay. So this is what's so cool, and this is what I try and teach people. Not just sexual, but all of our needs, wants, and preferences can change at any time, right? And so what's really interesting is there may have been a time where, so early on, somebody might be like, "Look, I don't want anything objectifying because that doesn't feel good." And then later, and our partner might hear it and go, "Okay, I need to cut that out." Well, that's fine, but at the same time, we might need to explore, hey, talk to me about why I can or can't say these things. Um, and that's what I think is so cool is that you guys had like figured out, let's see, I'm gonna want to make sure I'm reading it right. Pulled back on saying almost entirely sexual terms. Okay. So now it's you might want to figure out why that wasn't pleasurable for you and why you needed to pull back. And then it sounds like there was a point at which during sex it was still allowed, or if you're wearing something sexual, and what I would want to explore is what has shifted, but also if it's shifted and you've explained it to him, what's preventing him from being able to move it into other parts of your life? So what I'm hearing is, hey, if if I'm laying on the couch and he walks by, I want him to notice me and say sexual things about me, right? Like I want him to notice me as a sexual being other than in a sexual setting. And and so what I would want to explore is, well, have you expressed that to him? And then secondly, well, what's happening for him that he's not hearing it or able to do it? Like, does that feel uncomfortable for him? Is he compartmentalizing when he's allowed to say and do sexual things? Like, if he notices, gosh, it's really scary for me because if I notice you as a sexual being as you're laying on the couch reading a book, then it's going to get me going sexually. And I'm scared of getting me going sexually because what if you're not in the mood? What if you're not wanting to get in the mood and I start getting my sexual engine running? Well, okay, let's talk about that. Like, where are the blocks that are preventing this dialogue? Now, I think that is me answering it uh, because I don't even know how much of a question is there unless I'm misreading it. But ultimately, what a cool place for you guys to be because you're noticing these different shifts that are occurring. And now it's a matter of, well, is that a block on his end? Or did he just not know that he has permission? And if it's a block on his end, what's happening there that he's like, oh, I shut that part off. Okay, well, what would happen if you turn that part on? Now, he might be like, well, if I turn that part on, what else is that going to turn on for me? Well, great. Start, oh,
Spot on. I have vocalized these things with him. It feels like a shame response. Yeah.
that
Yeah.
makes me, I get
Yeah.
so excited. Okay, so if he is having a shame response, he needs to actually start sitting in and exploring that because remember, shame is most likely what's driven our maladaptive coping mechanisms. And so the truth is leaning into this shame, though it feels risky because it is. If I lean into my shame and I start to feel it, it puts me into a place where I have to deal with old feelings that might be associated with my past sexual acting out. Well, how do I lean into that to unassociate those things? Do I have the capacity and the ability, or is it as I explore it with my partner who is safe? do I get to a place where I go, look, it's too dangerous? Like, and this might be a bad example, but if I explore it and I go, look, I can't go hang out in the bar. It's not gonna work for me. Or if I explore it and go, hey, I'm fine. I can use this sexual energy and I can use it with you and I can learn to feel this again, but I've got to walk through slowly through my shame and try and figure that out. And if we do it together, I've got a support person and this gives me an opportunity to heal my shame and have such a healthier sexual relationship rather than being afraid or being in shame and in pain for being a beautiful sexual person. And so, what a cool opportunity for you guys. Sorry, this makes me giddy.
No, well, and I was thinking, it feels like what I'm reading is like if you put it like you end up taking the lead. Is if I put on, an alluring outfit, then he's going like, oh, now it's okay, like
Right.
there's more safety. It's like he hasn't had to take the risk, to initiate something. That was just what I'm picking up.
Well, and although I understand that as part of a healing process, the sad part is what I'm hearing is if that were the case and he can only engage once I've given the right cues, well then I'm always the authority in our sexual relationship. And although sometimes that can be fun in a certain sexual experience, I want to be pursued. I want to be longed for. I wanted to use the word I want to be lusted after, and I was like, I better be careful with that word. But the idea is that sometimes those are the words. I want to be objectified. I want to be seen as this hot, sexy, beautiful person, And it's like totally, there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with wanting your partner to have that desire. We just got to explore, like, hey, what are those blocks there? And this is the piece that when I dig in with a couple that's really working on their healing, it's, yeah, we want to get back to a place where we're equals as a couple. And it's not this, you're a sex addict and I'm a betrayed person. It's, hey, we both have found a lot of healing. How do we have this amazing sexual relationship? And of course, it's going to require um, careful exploration together. But gosh, how much fun!
That's
I
a
hope
great
that
place to end on.
it is.
Go have fun.
Go have fun.
And
And,
so
and
Matt's going to continue the discussion, about empathy next time. So join us, and this will be posted probably on Monday to our website. So
well, the other piece is that if you couples come back and ask questions, let's see how, if you come back with a bunch of questions, let's see how long you can put off my ability to do the empathy thing. Uh,
there you go.
I'm joking, but I'm not. Like, man,
No, we love
I have
questions.
I have so much fun. I could talk about healing sexual relationships every single time, every single session we do this, if that makes sense. But at the same time, I don't know that that's what everybody wants to hear all the time. So this is great.
Yeah. Thank you as always. Have a great weekend. See you next time. Bye,
I
everyone.